what's been the weirdest request? Like that thing that you've looked at and said, can't believe someone would want this. Like, surely there must
I
be
had
something.
a few weird requests. I was at a site in Sea Point, and the client asked me to put a bath in the middle of his kitchen.
Okay. Welcome to the Property Corner with myself, Rowan Alexander. On this episode, I'm going to be chatting to Eugene Human from Human Architecture, just exploring the world of architecture, what they do, where they fit into the ecosystem, and also learning a bit more about him. Eugene, I've met through dealings with my own properties and in industry, and he shares the same values where he believes education and educating people, in the nuances of our trade will sort of promote a more efficient system, and in that way also build credibility and share knowledge. So thanks, Eugene. Thanks for that. Thanks for making time for us. And so I think first off, something I've been wanting to ask you ever since I sort of met you is your shirt. Less human, more being. So tell us a bit about that.
It's just something I saw very long ago. It's just you need to be less than the normal humans we have these days and just a bit more being. Like you just need to be down to earth. Even got the tattoo, LHMB.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it just plays into my business as well. Human architecture, and has to do with everything in architecture. Just to design something that suits that specific client.
Yeah.
So it's not a one-stop shop. I know there's a lot of houses that's been built like a cookie cutter. You just use it on every plot, but it doesn't work like that. It could, but it's not an ideal thing to do, especially with the rain and wind and orientation of buildings. But yeah, that's it.
So so it obviously speaks to a certain value set, and which one would believe then flows into your designs and the way that you do business. And speaking out of personal experience, we first really met and worked together with my personal house. That
We
we're
were in
still
school
busy.
together.
Yeah. But I mean, like it properly meeting and actually interacting, especially around the field of architecture, was that exercise. And for me, it was always important to, we went through a process of conceptualizing ideas, and I shared, sort of certain things that I wanted, and you came up with certain ideas. And that whole process for me as a client was always about establishing whether the person that I employ is someone that I can work with more than the end product, because we're never going to get the design nailed, sort of first round, because I have an idea of what I would like, but I also need that sort of interpretation and making things, giving it some flair. So I enjoyed that. That was always the thing that I gauged my, sort of, what do you call it? My decision upon, sort of who I back to actually do that plan. So I think that does tie into sort of that less human, more being. I think I experienced that. So yeah, but Eugene, give us some insight. Sort of as an architect. Let's start off right at the beginning. So you hear these terms: draftsman, architect, technologist. What is this hierarchy? Like, what's this pecking order? How do things fit in?
Yeah. So I'm a senior architectural technologist. So, but you don't call somebody and say, "But are you a senior architect? Are you an architect?" Because an architect does building plans and stuff like that. So you get a draftsman. Obviously, it's you study until a certain degree. So you get a draftsman, then you get a architectural technologist, senior architectural technologist, and then you get an architect.
Okay.
So architect is just you can basically draw anything you want to draw, even though if the draftsman can do it as well. I think he has just more knowledge, like regarding the studies that he's done regarding the everything. The I've seen draftsmen that can do much better work than architects,
Yes.
but you have to be registered at the South African Council for Architectural Profession to do building plans. So you have that. There's 4 categories which you can register, and that's whatever your studies have what you've studied for. And then you can also go for candidate architect or candidate. That's a whole different ball game. But then there's certain categories that you can. It's like a draftsman can only do additions to existing houses. They can't do double-story houses. They can't do, say, for instance, a industrial building. Where a senior architectural technologist can go more into commercial, but you cannot, for instance, do an airport. So that's something an architect can do. But yeah, people in South Africa always get a way to get around that. So they basically do the plans. If they're a draftsman, do the plans, and they get an architect to sign it off for them.
Yeah.
Which is also not the right way to do it. But I think if the architect is willing to take that responsibility, then it's something he needs to
Look,
to
I
carry.
think like anything in life, you know, sort of the higher up that tiering you go, the more dependent they would become upon a team, you know, of subsequently of sub levels to actually execute work. And I think the accountability in terms of that actual final design and, you know, being held accountable and certain insurances, I think that would obviously play a big role based on that tiering, because the potential comebacks on, you know, big value projects or big infrastructure projects. Now, I would understand that there would need to be some form of sort of hierarchy in that.
Yeah. No, I've got 2 guys working in the office with me. One guy came from college, studied. He's a senior architectural technologist. That's what he studied for. He came into the office. He told me that he learned more in a week in the office than what he's learned where he studied, because he's working like with the items.
Yeah.
You have to work with the items, like a fascia board. You know it's a fascia, but what's the size of a fascia? They don't learn that in college. It's up to you to understand and what. So you need to be in the field working with the items to actually know what it is all about. So I think for him, it's. As I said, in a week's time he worked. He did more than what he's done in the college. Obviously, they learn other stuff. They're like more like the theory of architecture and what's a different type of architecture you do. But practically in South Africa, building a house with the items that we've got here is very, very important.
So, in this sort of let's call it hierarchy or environment or ecosystem, where does your business fit in? You know, what sort of work do you guys do? What do you put yourselves out to? Because like in any trade, I would imagine you become a specialist and you sort of you forge your way to a certain product, whether it be because you're good at it, you like it, combination of the two, you've got a market for it. Like, where do you find yourself? What do you guys do? What is your speciality and what do you enjoy doing?
Last week, I rearranged my garage. I came across a few documents, and me and my wife were having a chat. Like in 2004, I had an advert, like a business card thing I had where we lived in Hermanus. And I was on it, says additions, carports, boundary walls, everything it said there except new dwellings. Because I was scared for new dwellings because I didn't start. I've not done a new dwelling then. But then I got a new house it meant the world to me, because I could work with the builder, see how it works, and we started that design, and actually amazing house still. But just to give you the background that I've never done a new house, but when I started doing that specific house, it just came. It came. All the new houses just came one after the other, because it just, I think I showed what I could do with that specific house. So residential is what we are focusing most on now. We've done a few industrial buildings. That's not our primary. A lot of additions, alterations, especially from estate agents, getting that plans to the council for them, and they always want it as quick as possible. They phone you now and say, right, the last thing when they put the phone down is, right, when can we have the plans done, and how long is it going to take at council? I don't know how long is it going to take at council, but that's mostly what we specialize in. Not commercial that much, because that's like a white box. You need to fit out the building. That's more, for me, it's a lot of work. We can do it, but you need to spec everything, like finishing of the floor tiles, the walls. The handle needs to be like
becomes
that.
More of like an interior design.
Almost like that, yeah.
Okay, and so in this residential space, doing new builds, what's that sort of feather in your cap that you look back at now and say, well, I'm proud to have done that? Or, like if there's that moment that you've looked back and say, well, this one I'm proud of, what is that?
There's a lot of houses that I'm very proud of. I can't pinpoint one, but everyone is super unique. Like, there's not one house that you look back and said, but this is what we did with that house. Yeah, you use the same bath in that house, but the look and the feel where you sit in that bath is not the same. Where you look out the window, we do a lot of houses in Val de Vie. It's totally different than when you do something in Camps Bay. It's like the total different look and feel to it. So people sometimes think I'm mad, and they've seen me in the field, like in an open plot. I'll sit in the middle of the plot and just for 20 minutes and have a feel of what's around you. Hear the sounds around you, or where's the birds flying to, neighbors, is there trees in the vicinity, stuff like that. You hear a truck somewhere, is there a big road going? So it's all you think about. And the wind can blow to this side on this day, but to the other side on that day. So all that information, I think I mentioned this to you before, is we basically building a 10-piece puzzle, but we've got 20 pieces. So we need to fit that puzzle. And every family is unique. Like, you get people wanting to sit outside. Then you get people that they're not outside people. They want to sit inside. They want a nice big TV and a bar different. People are very different.
So how does, I think you start sort of building to a certain extent. Listen, I understand you're bound by design guidelines and things like that in certain areas, but there's generally, when you look at a house, especially when it starts getting to new builds that are sort of modern and relevant and new and haven't been altered, you can often find certain threads. Like, you can identify, well, this is Eugene's work, or this is that one's work, or that, like, especially us being in the industry, you start picking up on certain design elements. What is the thing that you think that maybe sets you apart, or that someone would be able to identify with when they see your work? Is there something? What do you think there is?
It's usually a trend of, like, architecture. Like, some architects use this the same as the other architects, but we like to bring the outside in. So we like that corner garden area, which you can see from the kitchen, but it's on the outside. So we like to bring in trees and plants and try to, if there's a tree on site, do our utmost best to keep it, and then trying to build the house around that. Not always the case if you've got small plots, but that's what we That's what we try to do. Client also has a lot of say in the building and how he wants the building to look. So we've got super modern houses that we do, and then we've got old Victorian style houses we want to do, or that we do, and the clients usually tell us, but listen here, but they've seen a Pinterest photo that they want this pond. Now you can't put that pond and they want this element there and that element there because it looks nice on the Pinterest photo, but everything doesn't work together. So we need to find a way to do that. Some architects do, the client asks for a circle and the architects draw a triangle. And the client says, but no, I can't work with this guy because I'm asking this, but he's giving this. So what we do is if the client asks for the circle, we'll maybe recommend a triangle, but then we take both of them and we make a new shape. We try and take what they want, but we'll make that areas functional for them to work with. So the most difficult part actually is if the layouts are done and everything, is to make the house like they want it. I usually ask them send me a picture or two, because you obviously know how your house wants to look. Send me a picture or two of how you want it to look, and then we talk through a list of things that you really want. Like you want a 3-bedroom house, you want a thing lately we're getting in houses, it's weird, but ice baths. People are installing ice baths in houses these days. You never thought that 5 years ago. So you actually get that in houses. So it's all catering for people in what they specifically want in their house. And new builds are so unique because I always say there's an open plot. That house is not going to be there 5 years and then they break it down and build it new. That is at least going to stand there for 50, even to 100 years. So you've got the opportunity to build a house on an open plot is amazing. So don't mess it up. Design something nice there. And I think if you take yourself in 500 years from now, there won't probably even be open plots for somebody to design, like in Europe. Yeah. They just need to take what they've got and make it nice.
So when you go through that process, you obviously, as you said, you sort of set up a list of needs and wants and negotiables and non-negotiables, but when you go through that process of then actually packaging this, so to try and harmonize the circle and triangle, what is take us through that thought process? What is the most important elements that you look at? Like flow? Is it aesthetics? Is it obviously? I understand that would be dependent upon the client's sort of wish list and needs list. But for you as the person giving guidance, what would be those sort of basic elements that you look at to say, well, fundamentally, if these things don't work, my design doesn't work. Take us through that thought process.
Again, different architects will do different designs. I think if you have an open plot and you appoint 10 different architects, you're going to get 10 different designs, obviously. So what I do is I'll bottom line always draw the perimeter of the plot, get the building line so okay, this is what you have to work with. Get your height restrictions, do your contours, see where to your plot falls. Get your north, south, west, and east, so you know where your sun is in the summer and winter, and then only you can use that wish list that the client gave you with the picture or two that they want and start your design. So best always to plot. What I do is I plot the garage. I always plot the garage first because that's the item that's fixed. That's like these days, I always work on, say, 6.5 by 6.5 internal. That's your garage. Like, plot it in the coldest spot in your house, because you're only going to drive in there and drive out. Most important thing for me is the living areas and how that connects to your bedrooms. most of the people, well, I saw clients that want bedrooms in front of their house. You get clients that want bedrooms at the back of your house. I think we were in that same situation with your plot. And I think that is interesting because you have a different view of previous experiences, that you want a bedroom to be in the sun. You want that sun in your bedrooms, say after 3, or you want the sun in the morning. You don't want sun from say 4 to 6 in the summer in your living areas because it gets too hot. So that's interesting because that's always the information that I require, because then we try and build something around that. There's not a starting point for me like, okay, we start with the kitchen or we start with this. Definitely the garage, because I feel like get that out of the way and we see what we've got to work
there's
with.
external factors like access to the plot. I mean, sometimes those become limiting factors. Something as simple as access, or especially in the case of a corner plot or something like that.
Or contours to that, because if you want to put the garage at the top, and that's your north facing, now your house is lower than your garage. Now you're not going to get that sun into your living area. So then I'll rather place the garage at the lower point, and maybe you can utilize that for a deck for the top floor, or even you can get a better view. I don't know. There's a lot of things to get to that final design, and then I think that's the most stressful part for me always is to take that design to the client and show him, listen, here's the design. He doesn't know all the points that we went through to get to that design. But I think when the client, and that's 80% of the time, when the client says, wow, this is it, then you feel so much more accomplished than sometimes you get clients that say, no, this is not what I had in mind. But then you need to explain to them and say, listen, this is why we did it this way. And I mean, we had a client before that sold the plot because he saw that it's not what he's going to achieve at the end of the day. So we rather plan. What is that saying? Fail to plan is planning to fail. Or what? So do it right from the beginning.
So what is the biggest mistake you see people make? Like,
send me too much Pinterest photos.
Okay.
There's a lot of people don't like you get clients that are very clued up and know exactly what they want. And then you get clients, like I said, from Pinterest photos. It's like an amazing roof, but you're gonna pay 300,000 rand to get the roof like that, and that's not worth. So do you want that look, or do you want to look at your budget? So there's a fine line between stuff like that. Obviously you can do it on a different way and try to get the design in a different way to achieve that same look, but it's not always. The Pinterest photos are difficult.
So I think something that I can relate to, especially in the new builds space, is I think very often people overlook in the natural environment with things like wind, northern orientation, natural shelter from the wind. And I think that's something which I can imagine after the fact, after having bought a plot, like you say, someone who's even gone to the extent of actually selling the plot because they envisioned something up front and it wasn't executable. How does one avoid that? The natural reaction, I suppose, would be to say, well, speak to the architect before you actually get into buying the plot to see if those two could be married. But very often, that it's that pressure moment. There's a plot, they want it, they buy it. Like, if you could give someone 5 tips or whatever, 1 tip or whatever, to try and take into account when they are viewing a piece of vacant land, what is What do you regard as the critical things to consider?
People always say that the corner plot is a nice plot, but the corner plot has the biggest boundary lines that you have. So if the boundary, if the building lines, if the building lines are 4.5, it's 4.5 in the front, in the side, and on the other side of the road. So that's like a lot of space you're losing. I would say a very steep plot is you have to look at your budget for that, especially cut and fill the building to actually to prepare that ground to get the building before the building standing there is going to be a lot of money. And speak to anybody, any architect, and tell them this is what I've got. I think if you have a big enough plot, anything is possible. I don't think we can't do anything for the client, because you can arrange anything that you want to. But we've got we had a plot last year. It's a very narrow plot, and he wanted to build 2 units on the plot. So we told them, like, this is what we say is going to work. So we did 2 long buildings, and we staggered the one in front of the other one, so that this one can have a living area at the back and this one can have a living area at the front, but both are away from the wind and both get the sun. So we just flipped the rooms and stuff. Perfect. It worked out perfectly. But the client did not want 2 long buildings.
Well,
because it gives you that. So we tried everything. We ended up in, I think, 8 or 9 different designs. We couldn't make it work. So, but if I'm talking about narrow, I'm talking about a narrow plot. It's like somebody took a normal plot and split it in 3.
okay.
So, but we got something to work. So obviously, if you are too small, if your plot's too small, you can get something to work. But there's a fine line between making it work and making it comfortable. So obviously, you don't want a 3-bedroom unit, but if you're standing in your bedroom, you're looking at the guy next to you staring at you. So it needs to be a comfort, because obviously then you're not going to sell it as well. So you need to look at selling that unit or that house in the future. There's a lot of things you need to think
that's
about.
also a valid point, because very often, we find that from a selling perspective, people have individualized the house to an extent, where it's so individualized that it is beyond what the average market would do. People often talk about overcapitalizing in an area and stuff like that. That's one element, sort of in terms of monetary value, pricing your property out of the market eventually. But I think something that you've touched on, and that is really relevant, is where people actually spec and customize a house to their needs, but it's completely disjointed with what the market requires. You see someone, look, there's certain markets, we all understand that this is the real world. There's certain markets where it's a case of people do what they want, and they can afford to do what they want, and it's because they want it rather than that they can afford it. Those realities exist. But I've often seen in scenarios where, let's take a general suburban area where a 3-bedroom house is selling for 2.5 to 3 million rand, and someone would walk in and say, well, they want this exact house, but they want it with 2 bedrooms. In a market where a 2-bedroom house is maybe only selling for 2 million or 1.8 million. And that often creates trouble, because while it may suit their needs now, it becomes very hard to sell that property, because the buyer base that you're speaking to after the fact needs to be someone who's looking for exactly those same needs. And so I think it's very relevant, balancing that, the immediate need. And I suppose it becomes less relevant the sort of higher up the food chain you go.
Well, they look like in COVID, they took a double garage and built to sliding doors and put Oma in the double garage.
Yeah.
Now, 5 years later, they want to sell the place. Now, you're not going to get it sold because there's no garage. So you're going to revert it to a double garage. You're going to get more for the building than selling it like as a unit. So that's exactly what you said now.
What's been the weirdest request? Like that thing that you've looked at and said, can't believe someone would want this. Like, surely there must be something.
I had a few weird requests. I was at a site in Sea Point, and the client asked me to put a bath in the middle of his kitchen.
Okay.
I had that. So that's the weirdest thing that I came across. But I think there was a few other weird stuff as well. I just can't pinpoint it now. But there's a few weird requests people asked to do.
Look, this is life. We are human. You know, people have different perspectives. Interestingly, did they actually end up doing that? The bath in the kitchen? And did your perception change afterwards?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not people differ. Yeah. So you get people that want stuff like that. And then, it's just not something I would suggest. So sometimes in the office, me and the guys in the office say, but yes, I wouldn't have done this. This is insane. So then there's sometimes like I'm designing a cinema room for somebody now. Then I'm designing my cinema room for him because this is something nice, because there's like 5 levels and we've got 4 seats and the bigger screen, and we've put like a mini bar in there with a wine cellar, and yes, we just did an amazing job. But then he's on the same page as us, and he likes exactly what we've done.
And what's been the thing that you've maybe started off thinking this is weird, you're like, oh, this isn't something that I would do, but after the fact, having reworked it and eventually gotten to the point of sort of doing it, that you looked back and said, well, it's maybe challenged my train of thought, or maybe challenged the way that I view things, and maybe looked back and then said, well, it wasn't, it started off as this really out there idea, but it ended up being something which you actually, sort of looked back and said, well, that's nice.
I think most of the architects can relate. If you design on a computer or paper, you see it in front of you. Sometimes you say, but that's a bit tight, but it's what the client wants. But I won't go any smaller than that. Then they start with construction, they start building, and you go stand there and you're like, yes, this is actually nice.
Okay.
And you're like, this can actually work because the view is there, the door is big enough. It just works. That's why it's also very important, I would say, for the architect to be involved with the building process. Because if you are on site and they, for instance, wall plate level, and you stand there and you're like, if we shift that window 1.5 meters to the right, we can actually see that tree, and that's what we want. That's nice, because if you're designing that on your computer, you can't really see that. Although we work with 3D software and stuff that can, we can build that environment in the software, but it's still not the real thing. So I think that's very important for me. It's nice to go on site and see, but this is, there's things that we can improve on the plans.
Okay, so Eugene, some questions. So first off, did you design your own house?
No.
Okay. Did you make any alterations to your house?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've put your twist on it.
Yeah, I've put stacking doors without plans.
Yeah, without plans. There you go.
No, I've made some alterations. Obviously, your dream is to build your own house. I've designed my own house already. I've done about 5 different designs. I just don't have the plot to put it on. But it's nice to, if you have the time to dream and see what you can come up with.
Yeah, look at that. That's one part that I do envy about these sort of trades is that creative side. I do think that that's also something special. You need to be creative, in doing these things. So it would be interesting to see that one day, though, to see this ideal house. Okay, so what do you love about being an architect? What makes you tick about being an architect?
Well, creating something out of nothing.
Yeah,
I think if you've got the ability, I personally like old houses which they were renovating and doing try to modernize it, try to better the flow, and just to fix the house. That's for me. I think that ticks.
that's actually like personally, I very much like that old Cape Dutch style. Not necessarily the external architecture, but the internal flow.
Yeah.
Where you've got no passages. Sort of a room leads to a kitchen, leads to a room, leads. That's a very unique sort of design. And look, it comes about because of our history in our country and the way that things were done. But it's also, we spoke about things that are quite trendy and relevant and topical. Things like having an ice bath or with things like that. What do you think is the biggest sort of influence in our era, of the way that people design their houses, or the way that they envision their houses? What do you think is that biggest influence that people would maybe look back at, in 50 or 100 or 200 years time and say, well, these people did that for a certain reason? Yeah. Have you thought about that? And what would you say that is?
Yeah, there's a few things. Like in the older days, there was like all these old homes have a toilet on the outside of the building,
Yes.
because if you worked in the garden, you can just use the toilet or go shower or whatever. Now you don't have that. Have you ever, after mowing the lawn, walked through your clean house to go shower? Is stupid stuff like that. But then again, we had the space that time, so we are evolving into this certain house style that we like. We are starting to do that now again, to put in bathrooms on the outside of your house. Obviously, if you have bigger houses, to do it. So we slightly moving back to that era again, but still open kitchen, open living area, open braai area, lounge, TV room in one specific area. We can still enclose that with stacker doors or frameless stackers, or what we like to do these days is like cavity sliders. We slide everything into the cavities, like an open building if you feel like it. But if you want that privacy and watching the Grand Prix, and then you want to close it. So yeah, different elements.
I think that's quite true. Sort of the open plan is something that I've witnessed in my time in industry. There's been an evolution. I maybe grew up in a house that was, built late 70s, early 80s, which was very segmented. And modern construction is open. And one of the things that I've observed is, I think it's because you're becoming smaller and more compact. So by segmenting, it becomes very claustrophobic. So it's almost been a natural adaptation to actually sort of open plan everything. If you look at a lot of construction in places like London, that's what's happening. Is people have had segmented homes and they're now trying to open them up and create
evolving.
a bit more space. And it's I had the privilege of traveling to Rome, and I was standing in some of those buildings where the natural floor level you're at standing today is maybe 1.5, 2 meters higher than the original building floor level. And it's because it's been redeveloped so many times, whether it was conquered and rebuilt or just redeveloped. But there's a limited parcel of land, and it's just sort of construction on top of construction. We're fortunate in South Africa, that we still have expansive space. Look, there's pressure too, infrastructural pressure and stuff like that, that's forcing us, and costs, forcing us to go more dense. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's something that's very valid is us moving to a more open plan, more compact style living. I've actually, that's triggered some thought with me too, is I think maybe also something that will be left behind is a lot more sort of secured living. If I think back in the 13, 14 years in industry, I can't remember when we've done a new project that's not in security. And security might be something that's relevant in South Africa, and high up on that list is that a lot of new development is happening in security. So securitization and that development, I think, would also probably be something which would be a earmark of an era. You take that building that I bought where we busy going with the rezoning. We both made the comment to say, well, look at this. Like imagine having a 600 high sort of wall in front of your building. That is how people operated. I mean, that you won't see that today outside of security.
Yeah.
So
no, but that 600 wall was just to keep the dog in.
That's it.
I mean, like we've mentioned now that the old buildings. You did your homework. What you did your homework on your bed.
Yeah.
You didn't have a laptop or a PC or something. Now we're sitting with like studies.
Yes.
We're sitting with sculleries. I mean, in the old days we had a scullery, but it was just a small area where there's a washing basin. Now you've got like the scullery is almost bigger than your kitchen because you want to hide all your appliances.
That's it, because it's in the open plan.
Yeah.
Okay, pet peeves. What's a pet peeve for you in your trade, your industry? So something that really works on your nerves. I think you've mentioned Pinterest.
Pinterest is one. I like it in a certain way because then I know exactly what I need to do.
Yes.
But to achieve that is the issue. Yeah. So we can achieve it. It's not a problem. But if you've got a budget of this and you need to achieve that, then there's always that to getting to that specific thing.
What's your dream assignment? So like that dream project that you get to work on. If there is one, that sort of keeps you awake and think, well, if I do that, I'll feel there's a sense of achievement. What is that?
I don't know. To maybe design a security complex in my specific design elements and special elements in that specific thing. I don't know. Ek weet nie. Ek weet nie. Ek het altyd gesê as ek sou gelike het as om eendag 'n company te hê waar ek ouens in Amerika, as ek gaan slaap, dan teken hulle verder. Okay. En as ek die oggend by die werk kom, dan is die werk klaar. En dan gaan ek net aan met dit. So daai is wat ek sal nogal, dit sal nogal vir my, maar dit niks betekenend te doen nie.
Ja, maar dit is nog steeds iets wat jy weet, en het hoef nie noodwendig daai produk, dalk as jy vervul met die produkte wat jy doen, maar daai kick sal daai produksielyn en ja. En dan, ek dink laastens om 12 af te sluit, if you could give advice to a younger self, a younger Eugene, what would that be? Sort of if you could sit down with Eugene of 18 years old, and whether it be anything, what would that be?
Get more sleep. I think the thing is, most of architects always have like long hours, but the thing is for that, well, my personal opinion is if I'm busy with a kitchen, I know what I want to do in this kitchen, so I can't go sleep now. I need to finish this kitchen because I need to see if it's going to work. And if I'm done with that kitchen, I'll go sleep because then I feel like, no, this is done. Tomorrow I'll start with the entertainment room and this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. So that's for me the the biggest struggle. So I think time management. As I said, you need to get more sleep, but time management is a big thing. I think in any industry, but that's it.
And just maybe in closing, if there's people or youngsters out there, sort of thinking about trying to enter this field, like or do what you do, or they have those dreams and aspirations. I think two things. What should they be doing, like in getting started? Obviously they need to have formal studies, but where's that starting point? Well, what how do they get into the industry? I think first off, and then secondly, I've picked up in our industry there's a lot of misconception between what people think we do and what we really do. And do you guys have something like that? Because speaking, if I look back, and it's become a core thing when I interview someone to work for me, is my question will always be, but what do you think we do? Because very often they come with misconceptions about what we do, because everyone sees the glitz and the glam of designing this beautiful house and walking away and sort of your signature on it, but there's a real side of it too. So I think double barrel question is what advice would you give to someone looking to get into the industry? And then is there any reality check that they need to employ?
Well, obviously, to get into the industry, you need to go study for what you want to be. What I did is, and I think that gave me a bit of a boost in the beginning, is I took my mom's house plan, my parents' house plan, and I just drew it on the software or even with hand. So that learned, all right, you've got double walls on the perimeter of the building. You've got single walls on the inside. Now you think, why is there single walls on the inside? Why don't they? Now you do research on that. Why is toilets on the outside of the building? Stupid things. Why the doors, maybe if you draw it out on your computer, you see the doors are 900. Why is the doors 900? So there's that practical thing, I think, is for me the most important, is working with that specific item. Why is the roof pitch on that pitch? Obviously you get different pitches, but what different roofs do you get? Sheeted roofs, tiled roofs, slate roofs, asbestos roofs, anything. So I think that gave me that boost, is being in the industry, because I was a roof designer before this. So I worked with roofs. Every specific item of a roof, I can tell you what that is and why it is like that. And that made me a specialist in the roofing industry. And when I came into, because I studied part-time for architecture, when I switched the roles of being a full-time architectural designer and not a roof designer, I knew exactly what to do with roofs. So I was already that step ahead. So anything, even if it's ceilings or aluminium, like window specialist, like the guy in my office, he came from an aluminium background. He knows everything about aluminium. So, and that's nice to apply that in your drawings, because you are the specialist in that field. Now, if you know everything of the building, then you're gonna produce the correct building.
I think it sort of speaks to that creativity and exploratory nature. By exploring and learning more, you're able to create more. And I think that's a sort of a curious mind, with it you see in creative people. Thanks, Eugene. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing some of your story and maybe putting some perspective and shedding light on what you guys do. So if people want to be in contact with you, we'll drop their details. We'll drop the details on we'll drop your information in the description. So let's get that right. And then, but otherwise, where can people find you?
Social media. So Instagram, hrc.co.za. Well, you'll see my phone number. Social media is actually
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So, if you've enjoyed that and you've enjoyed the discussion, just maybe learning a bit about sort of architecture, the ecosystem, that environment, and even maybe a bit about Eugene as a person and the human element to this industry. Um, uh, Subscribe to our channel. We'll be covering some more of these things. We'll, in future, hopefully be dealing with some practical challenges. And Eugene has suggested we take some questions, from the public and maybe unpack them for future topics. So feel free to comment below, subscribe on one of our podcast platforms, be it Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube, for more. Thanks for tuning in.